Way to go, Janet.
Thanks, sorry.
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 Thank you, Sergeant. We thank you, Sergeant.
Mark, who that?
All right, good
We need
morning.
to wait for Adam or.
I don't believe it. So we're gonna get started. We'll call our March 26, 2026 meeting to order. This public meeting of the Philadelphia Board of Pensions and Retirement is being conducted in person in the board's conference room, the 16th floor of Two Penn Center, pursuant to section 21-1503 of the Philadelphia Code. Electronic recordings of this meeting will be made through Microsoft Teams conference technology and by an audio. Electronic recording will be made available to the public online on the board's website without charge within 10 days. Please note that you consent to such recording by attending, participating, or speaking at such meeting. Our first order of business is to adopt the rules of order of the board as used and approved for our in-person meetings that are recorded. The purpose is to help ensure an accurate and complete reporting of the meeting occurred to comply with code requirements. So that motion has been made and properly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, vote to the roll. Brian? Tanya? Rashid? Marcia? Andre? Willie? And Carol.
Approved.
Motion carries unanimously. Item 2, a motion was made and properly seconded to approve our meeting minutes from February 26th board meeting. Was made and properly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Brian?
Approved.
Tanya?
Approved.
Rashida? Marcia? Approved. Andre? Approved. Willie?
Approved.
And Carol.
Approved.
Motion carries unanimously. Item 3, a motion was made and properly seconded to approve the consideration of 154 pension applications and 49 withdrawal applications. Any discussion? Hearing none. Brian?
Approved.
Tanya? Approved. Rashida? Approved. Marcia? Approved. Andre? Approved. Willie?
Approved.
And Carol.
Approved.
Motion carries unanimously. Item 4, case 4A, a motion to approve the service connected disability benefits for Williams and Brooks was made and properly seconded. Any discussion? 4A. Hearing none. Brian?
None.
Tanya?
No.
Gina? Marcia?
Denied.
Andrea? Willie?
Denied.
And Carol.
Denied.
Motion goes 0-7. Case 4B, a motion to approve service connected disability benefits for Norberto Garcia was made and properly seconded. Any discussion on 4B? Brian? Tanya?
Approved.
Rashida? Marcia?
Approved.
Andrea? Approved. Willie?
Approved.
Carol.
Approved.
Motion carries 6-1. Case 4C, a motion to approve the service connected disability benefits for Norma Clement was made and properly seconded. Any discussion on 4C?
Yes, so Jackie, after we reviewed the doctor's, decision, we felt it was very confusing. He gave 2 opinions. So he gave an opinion, do solely, then he gave an opinion, not do solely. So it was very confusing as to what is. Even though it's certainly actually certain that the language needs to be more, they need to be more clear on the decision on what is solely, maybe they don't understand our move for the do solely.
Which are you talking about? The
Or see, are we talking about it?
case 4C, but which opinion, Carol? Doctor?
Yeah, it's under Kaplan, but Smith is the doctor that wrote the opinion, I'm assuming, because he's the one that signed it. And he goes on to say, I believe that the clawing in the left hand is solely due to the October 28, 2021 injury in which she sustained injury. And now she has difficulty using the left hand and arm as solely due to the October 28, 2020 injury. She is permanently partially disabled from her job as a police officer, but not solely due to the fall in the left hand. So which one is it? If the left hand is messed up, the left hand is messed up. If she can't use the left hand to do her job, she can't use the left hand to do her job. That's what we go. So that's the confusion for us. That we just need cleared up. Like,
Are you making a request, Carol, or is that just a statement about general reviewing.
Well, I'm making an observation because as long as you write like that, then that means he's saying he told me that to upload because it needs to be clear. And I think Brian brought this up before about the doctor's opinions not being clear. Some of the doctors, not all the doctors, let me correct it. Some of the doctors' decisions is not clear as to whether it's due solely or it's confusion, giving us two opinions in one statement. So,
Thank you, and I know, Fran and Josh have gone back to talk to some of them.
and I'm sorry I didn't have those here. This just came to my attention last night. So, thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Is there any other discussion on the policy? Okay. Hearing none, the motion to approve is made and properly seconded. After no further discussion, we'll go to the roll. Brian?
I approve.
Tanya? Approved. Rashida? Marcia?
Denied.
Andrea? Approved. And Willie?
Approved.
This is 4C, right?
4C, correct.
Yeah, okay, yes.
Sorry, Willie? And Carol.
Approved.
Motion carries 5-2. Case 4D, motion to approve the service connected disability benefits for Cynthia M. Perone is made and properly seconded. Any discussion on D? Brian?
I approve.
Brian? Cheetah? Marcia?
Approved.
Andrea? Approved. Willie?
Approved.
Approved.
Motion carries 6-1. Case 4E, a motion to approve the service connected disability benefits for William Gustowski was made and properly seconded. Any discussion on 4E? Brian?
Approved.
Tanya? Rashida? Marcia? Approved. Andrea? Approved. Lily?
Approved.
And Phil?
Approved.
Motion carries unanimously. Case 4F, motion to approve the service connected disability benefits for Thomas Peeler was made and properly seconded. Any discussion on 4F? Brian? Tanya?
Approved.
Rashida? Marcia?
Denied.
Andrea? Approved. Lily?
Approved.
And Carol?
Approved.
Motion carries 5-2. Case 4G, a motion to approve the service connected disability benefits for Juar G. Spellman was made and properly seconded. Any discussion on case 4G? Brian?
Denied.
Tanya?
Denied.
Rashida? Marcia?
Denied.
Billy?
Denied.
And Phil?
Denied.
Motion fails 0-7. Case 4H, motion to approve the service connected disability benefits for Charles Stevenson was made and properly seconded. Any discussion on 4H? Brian?
Approved.
Tanya? Rashida? Marcia?
Denied.
Andrea? Approved. Willie?
Approved.
And Carol?
Approved.
Motion carries 5-2. Case 4I, the motion to approve the service connected disability benefits for Teresa Best is made and properly seconded. Any discussion on 4I? Brian?
Denied.
Tanya? Rashida? Marcia?
Denied.
Andrea? Bill?
Denied.
And Carol? 4I.
Denied.
Sorry.
Motion failed 0-7. Case 4J, motion to approve the service connected disability benefits for Eric Fields is made and properly seconded. Any discussion on 4J? Brian? Tanya? Rashida? Marcia?
Denied.
Andrea? Willie?
Denied.
And Carol?
Denied.
Motion fails 0-7. Case 4K, a motion to approve the service connected disability benefits for Stephen E. Jones was made and properly seconded. Any discussion on 4K? Brian?
Denied.
Tanya? Rashida? Marcia?
Denied.
Andrea? Willie?
Denied.
Carol?
Denied.
Motion fails 0-7. Case 4L, a motion to approve the service connected disability benefits for James K. Knox was made and properly seconded. Any discussion on 4L? Brian?
Denied.
Tanya? Rashida? Marcia?
Denied.
Andrea? Willie?
Denied.
And Carol?
Denied.
Motion fails 0-7. Case 5A, a motion to approve the application to have the pension calculated under Plan Y for Lisa D. Urso Smopolsky was made and properly seconded. Any discussion on 5A? Hearing none. Brian?
Denied.
Tanya?
Denied.
Rashida? Marcia?
Denied.
Andrea? Willie?
Denied.
Motion fails 0-7. Moves us into old business, thinking 6A. Motion to approve the service connected disability benefits for Scott M. Lynch was made and properly seconded. Any discussion on 6A? Brian?
Approved.
Tanya? Approved. Rashida? Marcia?
Approved.
Andrea? Willie?
Denied.
And Carol.
Approved.
Motion carries 5-2. 6B, a motion to approve the service connected disability benefits for Alfred Blacken was made and properly seconded. Any discussion on 6B? Hearing none. Brian? Tanya? Approved. Rashida? Marcia? Approved. Andrea? Willie?
Approved.
And Carol.
Approved.
Motion carries 5-2. Case 6C, a motion to approve the service connected disability benefits for James Boone was made and properly seconded. Any discussion on 6C? Brian? Tanya? Approved. Rashida? Marcia?
Denied.
Andrea? Willie?
Approved.
And Carol.
Approved.
Votes 4-3 as chair. I will vote to deny, so the motion fails at the tie. Case 6D, a motion to approve the service connected disability benefits for Dennis Carey is made and properly seconded. Any discussion on 6D? Hearing none. Brian? Tanya? Approved. Rashida? Marcia?
Denied.
Andrea? Willie? Carol?
Approved.
Votes 4-3 as chair. I will vote to make the tie, so the vote fails or the motion fails 4-4. 6E, a motion to approve service connected disability benefits for Timothy Bryan was made and properly seconded. Any discussion on 6E? Brian? 6E, yes. Tanya? Approved. Rashida? Marcia?
Yeah.
Andrea? Willie?
Approved.
Votes 4-3 as chair. I'll vote to deny, so the motion fails 4-4. 6F, a motion to approve the service connected disability benefits for Daniel Reed. The hearing it was made and properly seconded. Any discussion on 6F? Hearing none. Brian?
Approved.
Tanya? Rashida? Marcia?
Denied.
Andrea? Willie?
Approved.
And Carol.
Approved.
Motion carries 5-2. 6G, motion for the service connected disability benefits for David Marquis was made and properly seconded. Any discussion on 6G? Brian?
Approved.
Tanya? Approved. Rashida? Marcia?
Denied.
Andrea? Willie?
Approved.
And Carol.
Approved.
Votes 4-3 as chair. I will vote to make a tie by denying, and so the motion fails 4-4. Case 6H, a motion to approve service connected disability benefits for Josephine Izzard was made and properly seconded. Any discussion on 6H? Brian?
Denied.
Tanya? Sheila? Marcia?
Denied.
Andrea? Willie?
Denied.
Carol.
Denied.
Motion failed 0-7. And case 6I, a motion to approve the service connected disability benefits for Dean L. Fielding was made and properly seconded. Any discussion on 6L? Brian? 6L. I'm sorry.
Right.
I don't know what I'm doing. It's been a long week.
Yeah.
I'm trying to answer me.
I was waiting. I didn't know. 6I, yes.
Thank you. At times. Sheila. Marcia.
Approved.
Andrea. Willie.
Approved.
And Cheryl.
Approved.
Motion carries unanimously. It moves us into new business and the executive director report.
Yesterday, we people received council testimony yesterday, very well. Councilperson Gilmore Richardson, Councilman Swift, Councilman Crystal, all giving their compliments to the board, to staff, for the health of the pension fund, the health of the pension fund, and the work that everyone's doing. In particular, Councilman Gilmore Richardson, thank the staff of the pension fund, and specifically for the board, and specifically mentioned Ryan Carroll having done previous work. So very good to hear. More staff. Majority of our investment staff, executive group of benefits staff who are in attendance, and it's nice that the council can compliment the staff. So it's good to see. Okay. The papers, I believe, has given us an opportunity to present everything so far. So more details to come about the spring sale. Just have to soon for the so the board details to come on that, and those who will be part of the presentation. And the presentation will focus on, again, the improvement of the farm and health of the fund and what was done to get there. All the required state filings have been completed and by Shanika. So good work, Shanika, on that. I know it's not easy. Thank you for that. And I think since we have more actuarial presentations, I'll call off there. So,
Fran, is there the Detroit?
the other thing is not for, there's a NASC 37 annual financial services conference, which receives June 10th. It's interesting, a matter of the board.
Is there a motion regarding the June mask?
Motion to be trustee or CFO of town.
I said. Motion's made and properly seconded regarding the mass financial services conference in June. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Any items of note in the litigation summary, Ellen, that you wish to bring up? Nothing in particular. Motion is made to adjourn, and we'll move into deferred comp, and then after deferred comp, it's a short break.
Okay, I do have
Oh, I'm
some.
sorry. I know your business.
Yeah, I do, but I'm going to let you push forward and get with the.
Okay.
Then I'll come back because it might be a little bit.
Okay, thanks. Moving into deferred comp, the first item is the motion to be properly settled to approve our February 2026 minutes. Brian? Minutes motion for
Moving right along.
it's done. Approve. Marcia? Approve. Willie?
Approved.
And Carol? Motion carries unanimously and moves us into the afternoon.
Thanks. One back. For, in, that.
Morning, everyone. Good morning. Deferred compensation plan, February, updates. So the ending asset balance was $2,397,832,745, with about 19 billion above January. Participants that have an account balance is 28,423. That's 40 more than previous month. Actively contributing is 21,351. That's 21 more than the month of January. New enrollments in February was about 155. Year to date, it is 300 total new enrollments. Just want to highlight that of those 155, 72 enrollments went through the website.
Okay.
Oh, that is good. The 401A plan, $7,633,450. Participants is 2,067. The number of participants that do not have a 57B plan is 6. It's the same as last month. However, Matt and the team have been reaching out to those individuals.
Okay.
And I know board trustee Chris Pig's not here, but she actually enhanced the 401A flyer. She wanted additional content, so Matt has copies of it that can be distributed to everybody.
Sorry. It's okay.
Philadelphia Parking Authority has 685 now participants, 9 new enrollments in the month of February. That is due to our team, our local team attending the new employee orientation. Philadelphia Housing Development Corporation, 49, no changes from the previous month. The city offers after-tax contribution, which is raw. It is now at $147,519,854. That is 3.3% increase from the month of January. When you look at the total raw plan assets, it is, and compare it to the total balance, raw compromised about 6% of the total plan assets right now. There are 10,856 participants, 77 more than the previous month. In terms of participant utilization, it's around 38%. On the bottom, you'll see the percentage contribution that we report out every month. It is now at 4,229. That's 72 more than previous month. We did increase the penetration by 1%, so it's now at 20. So it's gaining momentum every single month. Call volumes dropped. We've seen about 2,773. It's normal to see that kind of drop in January because January is statement month period. It's a large volume of calls. In terms of online participants that have an online account, 23,181% of the total population has set up an online account. That's where all of the resources, the My Income and Retirement Planner tool, as well as webinars that individuals can access anytime on tremendous amount of topics that are relevant.
So we have a question, is the 23,000, is that applicants and retirees or just?
That's, anybody that has an
Anyone
account.
that's right, okay.
No, anybody that has an account. The 23,000,
Retirees.
are you talking about the number of online accounts?
Yes.
Yes. Anybody
Who
that
has an
has an account balance
Okay,
is listed.
right, so that would include some retirees.
Absolutely.
Yes, okay.
Which is good. because we
Yes,
want them to have-
Yes, exactly.
Happy to answer any questions that you may have. I'm going to pass it on to Matt to discuss the service activity.
Good morning. Despite the weather's best efforts in February to slow us down, we were able to make progress on top of January. So we were able to visit 17 different sites, 21 overall workshops across the city. Some of the events in February that were postponed to March will show up on the March report. As Bina mentioned with enrollments, the retirement specialists had 103, 60 more than they had in January. Enrollments from new employee orientations, 82, that represents a 26 person increase from January. Don, our CAP, had 2 webinars in February. He did take some time off in February, so that would be the reason for the decrease in that month in terms of the Wednesday webinars. But overall, good production and good service from the team. We got through total attendees for the month, 436 at the top of the page. Brief, any questions, comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
We should be paid to our covered comp and we'll take. Oh, well, should we come back to your earlier comment or you'll wait until?
So when we're gonna do the presentation?
That'll be in investment.
Oh, we are,
Yes, otherwise we'll take a break. So we'll have to check.
all right, let me go ahead and do it, so everybody get back to normal. But one of the questions is, I was told to ask this question. So the first one is active death health and welfare benefit. So if a person dies active and they not quite, they have, how does this go? They have the years to be retired. But some kind of way, they don't have, okay, I know. So they worked, it was AOL, he worked 33 years for the city, 33 years for the city. But he died active. But because his AOL wasn't considered time, considered pension time, he didn't have the 10 years to do the health and welfare. So his widow is not entitled to the 5 years of health and welfare, even though he died active.
Wait, okay, so how old was the person?
Doesn't matter how old he was, the matter is that he worked 31 years
Okay, of continuous service?
of straight continuous service, but when you're in the recreation department, if you are AOL, that don't go towards,
What's AOL?
I think Carolyn's unpaid leave of absence.
Oh,
no, he was not unpaid, he was working, so a title in the recreation is AOL, so they come under the rec leader. So he's like an assistant to the rec leader, right? So somehow, when you're in that position, your pension time is not calculated or considered. So when he became a rec leader, they counted his time, his pension time, but it didn't give him 10 years. So the 23 years he spent as an AOL, and I'll figure that out in a minute, did not go towards his 10 years of health and welfare benefit.
right.
So he didn't get qualified for health and welfare benefits until he became a rec leader. Okay, but he died an active employee. But the city is saying that he or his spouse is not entitled to the 5 years of health and welfare. And you don't have to answer me right now. Maybe you have to come back and research and come back to me. I just want to
Okay, you need to give me the name of the yes, if you provide the name and the social security number and the payroll number of the person, I will come back to you.
Okay, you won't come back.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So that's the one question. The other question is, for Plan J. But let me say, Y10 is Y, right? Right, okay. So for Plan, not J, Plan 16, right? Once they get to 65,000, that is their highest year. That's their average compensation. That's correct.
It's always the highest year. That's 16. The average farm count can never be highest.
It can never be higher than $65,000. I think as long as you don't cap, you in a defined benefit and it keeps accumulating.
If you're in plan 16,
Yeah,
at the defined benefit is currently $65,000.
that's what that would defined contribution, not for defined benefit. So what happens to defined contribution?
So plan 16, there's two different parts.
I
think just to walk through it.
Okay.
With defined benefit, which caps at $65,000. So even if you make $75,000, the additional $10,000 is not measured in the defined benefit portion of the plan. It's
You don't
capped
pay
at
contribution.
$65,000. So your average highest 3 years can never be higher than $65,000 currently, because that's the cap for the defined benefit portion of the plan. If you make it above $65,000, then you are eligible to contribute and get the match and defined contribution.
So what happens to your, I'm sorry. So what happens to your overtime that you're allowed to make before you get to the 65,000?
You're still allowed to make it.
Do you calculate that in?
Not if it's beyond 65,000. $65,000 is the cap, regardless of how the additional money is earned.
It's pension, the cap is not the pension.
So all overtime is lost?
Anything above $65,000 is not part of pension earnings.
You're saying, yeah, but see, y'all not affected, we're affected, so, and I don't think they know, but they the ones sending me the extra question, because I'm retired, I get mine at the 40. So, But it is confusing, that's all I'm saying, because people think that as long as they're not at 65,000, they get the 3 highest years included with the overtime, that you guys are saying. So what if they not at 65,000? How are they calculated? How is it calculated?
If they're below $65,000, if they're plan Y, everything is plan Y. Normal plan Y benefits up to
Plan
$65,000.
16?
Think of it that way, yes. Plan 16, everything is plan
You say
Y.
yes, but you do this, but the people don't know this, and this is the problem. Yeah. So, and,
I just read the legislation. I'm not in there. I'm just.
okay, Fred, you read the legislation, but you try to explain to people who don't understand and not used to it. I get that. So I'm trying to get clarity because I wasn't at the table, okay? And my picture was taken care of. I'm dead all day.
No, I get it.
So, okay. So this is what they told me next. So evidently they wasn't clear when they did negotiations. So when we had to explain this to the members, and not just union members, there's other people who are not in the union that this impacted. People around this table that had people, employees that this impacted, and they have to understand and explain this. So when they do a new member orientation to our members, this stuff come up. I don't know what to do on the city side, but it comes up on my side anyway. So, and that's why I'm asking the question, because this question was asked to me and I wasn't at the table.
No,
So I'm just trying to figure it out.
I understand. Nor was I at the table. I get it. And I'm glad to explain it to anybody. He does explain it at the armed forces sessions that he's at. I know that we explain it in any seminar that we're at in 2016. We're glad to do it at anyone's.
So if they're not at the 65,000 and they still on the defined benefit side, their pension is treated like they was in Plan Y. And the overtime is all included, all the overtime. is included.
Even anybody above 65,000, the first $65,000 of earnings is Plan Y benefits. 2.2% for the first 10 years, 2.0 for each year
I
there.
got that part. I'm just talking, they talking about the average, what is the dollar amount? The dollar amount that you base that 2% on, what they pay at.
If they're below 65, it's the average, it's the same calculation.
So even if they did a lot of overtime, it's only gonna take them up to the 65,000.
That's correct. Never, the defined benefit portion can never go above that.
So before, but under Plan Y, I thought all your overtime was included, to give you a 3 highest years.
In the Plan Y, everything's included because there is no cap.
So I got that, but okay,
Brandon saying the multiplier, the formula.
it's
the
a
same,
2.2,
except
right?
The pensionable earnings is capped at 65,000. So whether it's your salary and longevity, if you're allowed to earn overtime, all of that.
Overtime up to the cap of
Up to the
65.
Right, so however you
And then
get
once you
there,
get to the cap of 65,
that's the
that's
cap.
it. No matter.
Right,
what
that's
you
the
got.
maximum salary in the formula that Brandon was swapping. That's the structure.
Yeah, you
with-
shaking your head exactly. Financially, it's killing the members. But yes. So then this, I got a third one.
457 is so important. That's why the 457.
But it's not the 457, it's the 41, is why it's so important. That's so important.
The
But
enrollment.
I told them nothing, not to get that plan 16, they should have listened. So this is the other question, I'm sorry, Marvin.
No, go ahead.
But this is, so I'm over there, they gotta deal with that, that's what they, so the other question is, it used to be that if you retire or whatever, and you wanna come back, you got a year to come back to the city. That has changed, I understand, and they only got up to 5 years to come back. Huh? Yeah, no, I'm gonna tell you right now, Cable Candy. It Cable Candy, so yeah. So Candy said evidently they must have the civil service commission here, and they did their civil service. So they changed it. Everything else for the person to come back is still the same, like it's up to the department if they need to come back, whatever that. But a person has up to 5 years to come back instead of 1 year. I'm trying to understand the rationale and the impact when the member coming back after. Well, I'll be. So it came from Candy Jones. We let you go. Yeah. Okay. All right. Somebody sent it to me, and I'm sorry, y'all. I'm told to ask this question, so
And they
I'm
did
trying to be
the original date of service, if they come back within 5 years.
Well, this is my question I'm gonna ask.
Okay.
Do they get the original data service? What step do they start at? Do they start at step one? Or do they start at step where they left at, step five, or where they left at? So, this was sent from Candy back in July 2025, and they was getting around asking me, and she goes, please note that recently the reinstatement regulation have changed, and employees who separated in good standing can request re- reinstatement within 5 years of separation. This is to provide additional flexibility to the employee. The approval process through the appointing authority is still the same. That means, I guess, like if the appointing authority needs you or they want you to come back, whatever like that, that's still the same. And that was on Candy Blossom Jones. Am I saying it right?
Yes,
Okay.
what's the date on that?
Candy Blossom Jones, MPA, SPHR, SHRMC, Chief Human Resource Officer, HR Director, City of Philadelphia.
Okay, what was the
They
date?
should put all that in minutes now. Huh?
What was the date? July.
She sent this email to the union on July 2025. So that's what my question is. So yes, that's it. What is the impact? What is the start date? What is long? But I guess the longevity would change the start date. Then what salary do the person come back if they is well? Okay. Well, it depends if they left their money in. If they left their money here, the plan is the plan. If they took their money out, then whatever applicants who plan the city got in this at that time.
Just want to discuss that HR issue. I should also.
Yeah. Well, okay, I'll go, but I guess I'm pitching wise, how does that impact on the person? That was the other question.
I think the one thing you explained at the time, we're not withdrawing their contributions, we know that.
So no matter what they let them come back, but then do we calculate them? So it depends on what step they let them come back.
And it depends on how long they stay concerning recalculation.
Oh, yeah,
I'll
okay.
come back in here at least 3 years.
At least 2 years before you recalculate the
Otherwise,
picture.
your contributions. And that's separate, that's no change. I'm not familiar with this. It's an HR issue.
Yeah, it is a HR issue, but it kind of impacts the whole thing. You got to. Okay, thank you for listening to me, and
Thanks, Carol.
don't get back to me, I'm sure.
I'll get back to you. You can send me the information on
What you want to see?
the employee name.
Oh, yeah, I will.
Okay. We'll adjourn for comp and we'll check the break when we include the investments. That's it.
Sorry?
Oh, I didn't. Oh.
No.
You had it.
Okay, just check it out.
I'm not listening.
Okay.
So it should be.
Hey.
Okay.
We're gonna mute you. Oh,
Okay,
Okay.
we're gonna mute it until the meeting starts.
yeah.
Is that Haley? Hello, Haley.
Hello.
All right, there we go.
Until it starts.
All right, perfect.
Thank you.
Your arms is ready.
We are ready.
Call the investment committee. Session, first item is approval of minutes from the February meeting. Is there a motion? Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Agenda item 2 is the experience study. Welcome back.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Having a second meeting in a row here.
Yeah.
We're here to present the street study result.
Yeah, let's pass those around.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Chris, you still-
Yeah, you need them back.
Oh.
You need them back.
No, not yours.
Oh, no, you can leave that.
Chris was handling that.
Oh.
To make sure. Oh, we're good now.
We'll do your file. One for Helen, and then let-
You need one for.
You got it.
Did that be?
Yeah.
What's it? Huh? You don't count.
And we're ready whenever you are.
Right, thank you. So we'll start with the board responsibilities. We'll review background with experience rate. We do this once every 4 years. The methodology we employed, summary of what we've reviewed and our proposed alternative assumptions. We'll review the cost impact and then we'll look. So in terms of the board's responsibility, today review the results that we provide. Review the cost impact of the proposed assumption changes, and then adopt changes effective for the 7/1/2026 valuation, which is completed 7/1/2025. So this is for the next fiscal year. And then we will be submitting a copy of this report to the Auditor General's office in conjunction with the actual filings that are due at the end of the file. The purpose of an experience study is to review how the assumptions have done with and compare it to the actual experience. This is required under Act 205 to be completed every 4 years, and we do it based on 5 years of data. The last time we did this was in 2022, with the assumption changes being effective for the July 1, 2022 valuation. When we review the assumptions, we always want to remember we want these to be, the assumptions are all long-term in nature, and they need to be reasonable both individually when we look at each assumption at a time, and then in aggregate, and combining all the impact of the assumption and the impact of the assumption. So let's start by reviewing historical gains and losses. So on this page here, on page 4, we're showing the history, the 10-year history of gains and losses from assets and liabilities. So the blue bar are the assets, and those are dependent on market fluctuations, the value. And we can see that we have losses and some years of gains. And that's what's interesting. The yellow bars is what we're going to focus on today. That's the liability gains and losses. And you can see in the early part of this, 2016 through 2020, we've seen mostly losses. Some years were pretty small, and then we had a big gain in 2021, and that had more to do, that's a liability gain. It had to do with some adjustments that we made in the data to adjust for years of service for individuals who had break-in service, where we were previously we didn't have enough data to have the break-in service factored in. That was a system update that was made. And then following that, we've seen losses 2022 through 2025. Ideally, we don't want to see losses consistently each year, but we will review that in this, last 5-year period, just post-COVID, there's been several factors that have led to specific participant behavior that may not be, more long-term trends or normal. So on page 5 here, reviewing the unfunded liability change over the 5-year period. So July 1, 2020, the unfunded liability, that's the liability minus the assets, was $5.795 billion. In this 5-year period, investment losses have added $178.7 million. Liability losses have added $354.8 million. And assumption changes that are happening each year with the discount rate being reduced 5 basis points. And this also includes the assumption change that was made in the previous experience study. But in this 5-year period, the assumption changes have added almost $400 million
unfunded at the same time, it's being paid down by virtue of the contributions that are coming in and under the Act 205 and MMO basis, that's reduced the unfunded liability 1.17 billion. And then additional contributions that are coming in under this revenue recognition policy, so the all additional sources, including sales tax, member contributions, RRP in excess of MMO, and then the city contributing in excess of the RRP. All of that has reduced the unfunded by 1.19 billion. So in this 5-year period, it then goes down from 5.795 billion to 4.369 billion. The funded ratio, I think, was 52% at the start of that, increasing to 67. 67.7, so pretty drastic improvement in funding level. So looking specifically at the assumption matrix, this just breaks down by year and kind of unfunded. So you can see for each year we pretty much had a 5 basis point reduction in the discount rate. Anytime the discount rate is reduced, the liability goes up, and so there's an additional liability. And the previous experience study impacted $100 million increase, and just of that was went out. So moving on to page 7, just why we do these experience studies, a detailed review of the assumptions, and we're going to see how well the assumptions are working when compared to the actual behavior. We look at 2 specific groups of assumptions. Economic assumptions deal with system-wide elements, so that's investment return, which builds into the discount rate, salary increases for individual members, inflation, which doesn't have a direct impact on the valuation, but it is a building block that is included in both salary increasing and the investment return. Total payroll growth, this is looking at payroll in aggregate, how that grows over time, and then administrative expenses to run the fund that are paid out of the trust. The demographic assumptions deal with membership behavior, and so we're looking at mortality rates, retirement rates, disability and termination, and then we have some other assumptions, including marriage and service-connected disability. So when we review the actual versus expected experience, we propose changes in assumptions when we see that the trends are changing. So we're looking at the historical period, but we're also wanting to review are the future trends expected to match the historical experience. So to the extent that there are reasons where future trends may not be supported by the historical experience, we may either partially reflect or we can wait to review. So we're doing these experience studies every 4 years. So to the extent that we have a lot of noise in the data, we could wait and monitor and review at the next period, which we will be doing for some of the assumptions today. So the summary of the economic assumptions, the discount rate 7.3 was reduced already from 7.25 valuation to 7.25%, and the board approved at the previous meeting to further reduce at the next year's valuation down to 7.2%. The salary increase rate, we have a salary scale that varies by age. We're proposing no changes to that, and we'll review why we support no changes currently. Inflation, 2.75%. This is still in a longer term period. This is still reasonable, so no changes there. Payroll growth, 3.3%, no changes. Our actual is in line with the expected. And the administrative expenses, we're looking at the previous year expenses and increasing them 3.3%, and that's still approaching. Looking through the different demographic assumptions, on page 10 here is the mortality assumption. So typically, most assumptions, like some of the other assumptions, are more plan specific, but mortality is one where we rely on standardized tables. So the Society of Actuaries publishes tables based on data countrywide, and they produce different tables by retiree, regular healthy retirees, active member, disabled retirees, and within those there are subgroups for general employees or uniformed employees because mortality would vary between subgroups. So our current assumption moved to what was called, and the last expense study was called the PUB 2010 tables. Those were specific tables for public sector plans from experience drawn from across the country. And we would take those and we would adjust them to match the experience of the system, because we have a large system here that we have credible data to be able to make those adjustments. For this current expense study, we're proposing to move to what's called now PUB 2016 tables. That's similar to the 2010 tables, but they were published last year by the society, and they're the most recent tables available. So that includes mortality expense through the year 2016. Most of these are inline, so we're moving from 2010 to 2016, not a drastic change because the baseline data is still public sector data.
Can you start with this?
Yes. I was thinking this. Yes.
So for municipal general employees, and we'll look at the actual, you know, you will see this perhaps, but when adjustment of 107, we're saying that the rates are higher for Philadelphia than they are in the general, so that we're increasing the rate by 7%.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? Yeah. Are they living longer or
They
retiring earlier or?
No, so this is mortality. So this would mean that they're living less than
Okay,
the average.
less than the average. Okay.
Okay, so 7% less than the average.
Okay, so it's adjusted. Okay. So this is the East Coast. So is it by sizes? Do you think it's because of the size of our city or
So there are multiple factors. There's also income level, like generally
okay.
higher income
Yeah,
level.
okay.
They're expecting better mortality experience because they live longer. But the adjustments are, we look at the actual data and then we look at the experience that the system has, and then we look at the actual expected ratio and make adjustments to get that ratio to closer to 1. So the actual experience would match what would be expected from the table. But yes, generally the adjustments when we're adding, we're increasing the rate at which people are dying. We think that on based on the table, the Philadelphia experience is more dense. And the cities, yeah. And it is projected to improve in the future too. So there's two pieces of the mortality assumption. There's the base tables, which is just looking at the number of deaths and the expected life expectancy today.
Yes.
And then the second piece is what we call projections of improvement in the future. And what that does is, if we're looking at somebody who's 50 years old in 1970 versus 2000 versus 2030, over time, there's been lots of different factors that would improve a 50-year-old's life expectancy with better medicine, you know, whether that's better living conditions, you know, trends like smoking is not as prevalent as it used to be. So things like that would project improvements in mortality over time. And then there's tables that the Society of Actuaries would produce for projecting those improvements. And we're using the latest table, which is based on 2019. And we'll go into this a little later, but we're also not projecting all the way to the future. And we're using this step-by-step, let's review how experience goes and then make those improvements slowly. So each time we do an experience study, we project the improvements only through the end of the following experience study period. So we'll go into that as we review the mortality tables. On this page, these are more membership behavior changes, retirement rates, that's the rate at which a member would retire based on the age. These will vary with municipal versus uniform members because their retirement ages are different. And then termination rates and disability rates. Overall, for all three of these, in the last 5 years, we have seen that the actual experience was much higher than what we had expected. But we also know that just post-pandemic and all of the workforce disruptions that have happened, may have been causing some of this. So initially, we were seeing higher deaths just immediately after COVID between 2020 and 2022. And then we started seeing accelerated retirements. The retirements were causing workforce shortages, and this is true for Philadelphia and other systems across the nation. With the workforce shortages, we might have had retirees that are coming back, or higher pay to keep people on, or overtime pay to make up for shortages, which may have resulted in higher than expected pay during that period. Once things started going back from remote working, well, initially going to remote working gave individuals more flexibility. They might have switched jobs, so termination rates were higher. But with the return to office, we might have some people not wanting to come back to the office. So there's so many things that may have caused disruption in the last 5 years. So our overall, suggestion here is no changes right now, which means we're relying on the pre-COVID data, the historical data for all of this. And we'll monitor it because we're doing these every 4 years. So we will monitor closely. And at the next experience study, we should be able to tell, are these trends going to continue in the future? Or was it a one-time disruption?
Some of them already started to normalize.
Speaking of disability, we've already seen a reversion to the mean disability applications. During COVID and the immediate post-COVID period, we saw a large percentage increase, and as you know, in the number of applications. We've started to see that revert back to the mean over the last several months. So the idea is the review is supposed to be for the longer term, with accurate assumptions, or longer term in nature, at least with disabilities. We're not sure that that small outlier period where we saw an increase in applications represents a longer term trend. We don't believe we are seeing it back to the mean.
I was saying something steady. It's disability grade 8, it's no change in their medium age or something like that. Or not.
Do you hear the question?
Sorry, Carol, I didn't hear the question. Oh, these are rates by age. We'll show you the table. So what it means is that depending on the age, we see different levels of
Right,
disability
that's what we're looking at
retirement.
the age, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So our rates vary by age.
Okay.
And we'll be able to see them when we look at the table. So some of the other assumptions that are built into the evaluation, what is the percent married for active members? We expected 70% of active members are married, and for the retiree or non-active, it'd be 40%. Based on actual data, we are seeing that the marriage rate for active members is lower, so we are proposing to decrease it from 70 to 65%. We have an assumption about male spouses being 4 years older than female spouses. That still looks like it's in line, so no change there. We have an assumption about what percentage of disabilities are ordinary versus service connected. So no changes for municipal, but for uniform members, we are seeing this is not just a trend this experience study period, but even the previous one, we saw that there were more service connected disability for uniform members. So we are increasing that assumption from 75 to 80%. So what that says is of all the disability, 80% will be service connected. It's what we're seeing in the data. And then death, again, ordinary versus service connected, and this one is in line and no changes. So given the alternatives that we reviewed, estimated cost impact, this is based on the 2025 valuation, which is why we think estimated. Of course, if these changes are adopted, the first valuation that would impact would be 2026. The two items that are being changed, mortality, moving to these new pub 16 tables, and increasing the projected improvements to the end of the next experience study period, would increase liability by 81.7 million. Employers, the city portion of the normal cost would go up 1.5 million. And this increase in liability gets amortized over 20 years for assumption changes. So there's a $10 million decrease in RRP that will continue for at least 20 years. No changes from retirement, termination, or disability, or pay salary scale. The other changes with the marriage assumption and the service-connected disability will reduce the liability tax by 8 million and reduce the RRP by 1.2. So in aggregate, we expect that the liability would go up 71.9 million and the RRP would go up 8.8 million.
And what does it mean for the 100%?
About a reduction of about between 0.3 and 0.4, it's 0.36%, so we're at 67.7 for 2025, and as of 2025, it'll go down to 67.4.
We also changed that was based on 7.25.
Yes.
So on
So next year, another 0.3% for the discount rate would be just above 67. Around 67.
go the other way for reducing it? To go down another point.
Yeah, so it's down from 67.7 to 67.54, and then further down to 67.1.
Got it, okay.
Those temporary changes. Does not change July 1st, 2032 date.
So you meant temporary change, the disruption in the retirement rate?
These changes.
These changes, I haven't looked that up, but I mean, it's not a huge enough change that I expect it's gonna still be around there. But the one thing I'd say is, to the extent that on this, on retirement termination and disability, if those trends continue with those higher levels of retirement, higher levels of disability continue, then we're gonna continue to see losses each year. Because when you're reviewing assumption changes, when you make an assumption change, you make it in the expectation that you want to match what's going to happen, which means you're expecting, you're taking care of what have been future losses, you're taking care of it today, anticipating. Now, if us not changing these assumptions because we think it's short term, if it's short term, no issue. If it turns out these trends are for longer term, we would continue to see those losses. And when those losses occur,
Slightly different question.
That's a different
so
Yeah.
yes,
Forget the different recommendations.
you're talking about these changes.
Different recommendations are being made. Based on these recommendations, prior to these recommendations, we were projected to be 101.7% funded by July 1st, 2032. Based on these recommendations, will that change?
We haven't actually built that, and we can get back to you. I anticipate likely not, it's going to be in that range, but we can get back to you with the exact.
Okay.
Brandon, one thing also is when we make these changes, the costs will partially be paid for in the next 5 years. So the RRP would increase by, let's say, $9 million over the next 5 years, which would partially pay for the costs of each year.
Right. So
So it will come down slightly, not completely, because it will be.
Okay, diving into economic assumptions, we look at the past experience, general historical experience, we look at the outlook for the future, and then we do a comparison. So the 4 assumptions here: investment return, the current 7.25, the actual experience of the system based on market value is 9.65 over the experience study period, which, you know, we've had 3 years of double-digit returns. Pay increases, these are the average increases for continuing active. Our assumption expects 4.82, but the actual is 6.28%, so higher than expected. Inflation, of course, we've been in a high inflationary period, so that's also higher than expected, but we think that's short term. And we're looking at long term is more like 70 years. And then overall payroll growth 3.3, we're not too far off from the 3.7. We reviewed this slide. This is really just for completeness. Our investment return assumption compared to other systems. The median is 7. We're at 7.2 right here. So now we look at the individual salary increases. For municipal, we did see higher rates than what we had expected. For uniform members, we saw that the experience actually matched what we expected.
I'm gonna mark that page.
So here we're showing our assumption for salary increases. The green line is showing our assumption. It varies by age. So early in the career, right out of college, or in their early career 20s, we expect to see large increases from year to year in pay as individuals are getting promoted, they're learning skills. So you expect large increases. As you progress in your career, those large increases are already built in, and we start to see the year-over-year rate decline. And once you get to closer to retirement, we expect it to be closer to inflation. Just generally how the salary scale works, it's not expecting salary increases to progress. The red line is showing the actual average increase for municipal members in the experience rate period. So you can see in the early years here, it was lower than what we expected, but around 25 and on, it was quite, it was higher in every single age group. So we dug a little bit more into this data to just see that we can see any outliers, what's driving this increase. And what we found was, and we saw this as we were reviewing valuation results each year, we were seeing losses coming from salary expected. So there was 2023 valuation where it seemed to be an outlier, increases were much higher. And then there was also increases in overtime pay. This is for municipal members, overtime is included in pensionable earnings. And so if we excluded overtime and if the outlier year 2023, we see that the red line is closer to the green line. So just based on this, we would propose to wait and see how these increases, are these going to continue in the future trend? To the extent overtime might have already increased, that built into the baseline pensionable earnings and evaluation. So it's not realistic to expect overtime to continue to increase in future years. And then, of course, if the outlier years move, then the average increases are not too much higher than our assumption. So we're proposing a wait and see approach to the other that we monitor each year. So no changes there. This is showing uniform members. Again, green line our assumption, red line is the actual result. In the early years, it's lower than expected. In the later years, higher than expected, which it also seems reasonable in the sense we may have, because with the workforce shortages with the uniform members, there might be lower retirements or people being brought in or paying more to stay on. So again, we don't propose any changes. We'll monitor results. Inflation, this, as I said, no direct impact on the valuation, but we monitor it. Here we're showing the CPI in 10-year blocks by each decade. And you can see here the last 2016 to 25, 2025, we have been in a high inflation period, but we want to look at a really long term for this. And over the 30 years, the average is still 2.45. So we think our assumption of 2.75 is still okay. Payroll growth. This is our projection. We use this in our projections, expecting how the total payroll for all members is going to grow in the future because the contributions are based on the payroll. So we expect payroll will grow each year by 3.3%. The 5-year trend rates for the payroll over a 10-year period, 3.5%, 5-year period, 2.6%, and over a 3-year period is 2.9%. So the trend lines are close to our assumption. We propose no changes. On this graph here, we're showing the trend lines. Red is the current assumption. The yellow, green, and blue are the trend lines. And the black is the actual of the rate, which varies from year to year based on salary increases, active membership. In years like post-2021, where active members went down, payroll went down. Now we see salary go up and the number of actives go up, which increases payroll.
That 21 drop, that is outside the period with this current setting is 22, 23, 24, 25.
Correct, because we're doing from 21 is the target.
Okay.
So any questions on the economic assumptions or do we move on to demographic?
All right, so good morning, everyone. Be back. So we're going to dive into the demographic assumptions. As you talked about, we're talking about retirement mortality, termination, disability, things like that. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the process, how we set up these assumptions. Mainly we're comparing what actually happened versus what we expected based on our assumptions. That's going to be our A/R ratio. We'll talk about that on the next slide. We look at any external influences. We've already talked about the pandemic quite a bit. You'll see it when we look at the results and how it's kind of impacted this 5-year study. We're going to account for any potential future trends. We've touched on mortality improvement a little bit. We'll talk about it a little bit more when we get into mortality. Based on what we've seen and what we expect going forward, we'll propose alternatives to any of the assumptions we feel appropriate for long-term trends. And finally, we're going to talk about credibility. So this kind of takes a look at, is there enough information to make a change going forward based on future trends that we would expect? And we'll talk about that when we look at confidence intervals. We have an example next page as well. So page 25, the bolded, gives that pre-bolded words, any sort of key metric that we're going to see on the slides. Probably the biggest one we'll talk about is actual to expected ratio, or A/E ratio. That's just the ratio of the actual number of decrements to what was expected. So if we expected 100 retirements and there actually was 100 retirements, that A/E ratio would be 1. You generally want that moving closer to 1. Doesn't have to be exactly 1, but that means that our assumptions are in line. Not necessarily. If you review the assumption community here, some years it's going to be higher, some years it's going to be lower, but we generally want to move in that direction of going towards 1.
We don't want to, it's not better.
Not necessarily, no. There's a metric called R squared. So this is kind of how well the data fits kind of a pattern of what we're seeing. So this is more of a variation. So for example, if you're high in one area and low in another, you could have an A/E ratio. That's 1, but it's not going to fit the data well. We want to kind of make sure the line kind of fits in a similar direction. As we looked at the salary scale, it's kind of a trending line that's going downward. We want it to kind of fit a similar pattern. And similarly, that's going to be something we want to go closer to 1 as well. Then finally, the last metric is the 90% confidence interval. This is a range that we're going to show. It'll be a gray shaded area. And this is where we can say that the data fits that bar 90% of the time. So when we look at an example on the next page, if there's generally less data, we're going to have a wider range. If there's more data, there's a smaller range. It gives us more confidence in terms of finding that trend going forward. So this is a simplified example that's kind of helped show you, because this is going to be on essentially all the slides that we show. The bar graph on the right-hand side. So these are 3 gray bars. In all situations, the observed data, which is the black data, is at 10%. So the first example, there's 10 exposures. So 1 out of 10, 10%. You kind of move over to the right, 10 out of 100, 100 over 1,000. So in every example, it's 10%. But when we have 1 out of 10, it really doesn't give us much credibility. That ratio shaded area is between 0 and 30%. So having a 30% range gives us quite a bit of variation of where the assumption might lie. Obviously, when we have 1,000 points of exposures, that range drops to 8.5 to 11.5%. So it gives us a much tighter range in terms of where we think the assumption may fall. So that applies to this system. This is generally a larger system, so we do have more data, and that kind of helps building our trends going forward. So that was our process. Now we're going to jump into the assumptions. The first assumption we're going to talk about is mortality. We talked about some of these things before. We're going to move from the Pub 2010 to the Pub 2016 table. Again, moving from one table to another doesn't necessarily increase or decrease the cost. We're adjusting these standard tables to fill out this data. And kind of what we saw that's going to have a little impact in terms of the cost changes for moving from one table to the next. Again, we have different level of categories. General tables, those are for municipal workers. Public safety tables, those are going to be for uniform. We also have teachers tables. We don't have that in the Philadelphia plan, but they are used for teacher-specific groups. And as well as various income levels, which we use to try to help fit the data for this plan. The second piece of that is the mortality projection. So this is mortality improvement. We're using what's called the scale MP 2021. We were projecting it to 2025 in the last experience study. This experience study we're moving it to 2029. Again, as we mentioned earlier, we're projecting it 4 years into the future to the next experience study, which is similar to our current method of recognizing gradual mortality improvement. If you take all the projection year, that's how you get the using the generational mortality. So if you just use the MP 2021 table without projecting it to a certain year, then we're essentially saying that there's mortality improvement for the lifetime of members going forward. The last thing we're touching on, which is kind of maybe a good reason to kind of pause and kind of keep the current method, the MP 2021 table, that's data through 2019. These tables were coming out every single year from 2014 to 2021. COVID hit, kind of put a pause on what exactly the projected mortality improvement would be. There's an expectation, though, that a new table will come out in the next 2 to 3 years, which will be before the next experience study when we revisit this again. At some point, we likely will probably need to move to generational mortality, as we've seen a number of systems moving to that, because we do know, as we've kind of seen now, that people today are living longer than they were just 20 years ago. So the expectation.
It seems similar, the actuaries are making a similar decision here to what we were talking about, for example, disability, where they see there was an outlier period, so they don't want to take that in at this point. So is that kind of the same?
It's similar in the sense I think there's a theme that there will be improvement going forward, but as kind of you said, now there's hesitation of what that improvement is.
It doesn't make sense to use the outlier period for anything.
Yeah. So when they come out with the new tables and we do another experience study, I think there's going to be some better trend in terms of procedures going forward. Of course, there is a cost to that whenever you do implement that, because then you are expecting mortality improvement for the rest of somebody's life instead of just the next.
Assuming that would happen.
Just the last bullet, because we'll see it on the graphs as well. We do weight the experience and benefits and benefit amounts for liability purposes. The liabilities are weighted by a stream of benefit payments, so we convert the participant counts to benefit amounts, which is why I don't see larger numbers when you look at the chart. But I'll explain that. Slide 20. This is essentially just repeated information from what we had from the proposed assumption earlier. Again, a lot of numbers on that page, but similar to what we talked about. So slide 29, just to kind of point out, there are sheets of how these slides. We're just going to kind of go over the first one in detail, and then the rest of them kind of follow a similar guidelines, so we don't need to go through all these slides for everyone. So just to kind of give an idea of what we're looking at here. So this is specifically retiree mortality for municipal mail. So each group gets its own graph, which is why you have a lot of graphs through groups. The x-axis is the age groups, so all the ages are grouped in 5-year buckets. The y-axis is the percent of mortality at each of those years. The black dot is the observed mortality. And then we show 2 lines, the current assumption in blue, and then the proposed assumption in green. The gray shaded area is confidence intervals, so you have to tie that back. You can see in the earlier years, 50s, 60s, those confidence intervals are so small you almost can't see them on the graph. That just means there's a lot of people at those ages, so it gives us a lot of confidence of where those groups are. Go wider out, 95 plus for ages. The gray bar is getting quite a bit bigger because there's less people at those ages. The chart to the right of the graph, those are just sample mortality rates. So if you wanted to see what we're using for our assumptions, we have our specific ages that we're using and then the current versus proposed mortality rates. The bottom chart, this is the numbers behind the chart. So just to give you an idea of how many people we're talking about, there was over 45,000 exposures over a 5-year period. Doesn't necessarily mean there's 45,000 people. You could begin the period for 5 consecutive years. So you lived for 5 years, you showed up 5 times. If you lived and died in the first year, you only showed up 1 time. So it's not necessarily people, but it's exposures over the 5-year period. Actual deaths, that is, actual deaths during the period. That was just under 1,900 numbers. And then the large numbers to the right, that is just converting participant counts to benefit the benefits for those participants. But most importantly, we can focus on the right-hand part of that is the A over E ratios. So that's our actual to expected ratios. We can see that there's actually, with everything going on here, the actual to expected is almost virtually the same, about 98% current, 98% opposed. So we're recommending very little change here. And you can kind of see that with the chart. The assumptions are pretty much in line with what we're expecting. So we're not going to rock the boat here. We kind of keep it where it was before. On the next page, municipal females, just to kind of touch on the slight difference. Municipal females exposures, there's more exposures. So we're going to 57,000 members compared to 45,000 deaths. There's more deaths, 2,300 versus 1,800. So just give us even a little bit more credibility. But at the end of the day, we're actually seeing a very similar trend for municipal females, 98% actual to expected ratio for the current versus proposed, and the chart is virtually unchanged and very similar to the male charts. The next 6 charts are essentially going through the uniform group as well as disabled members, unless there's any questions specifically on mortality.
Anything that stands out
skip those.
that's different, we should know otherwise.
Okay. Yes, so it's very similar to what we showed here. We're just making those same adjustments on those next slides.
I have a question, like on some of these back ones, like proposed is 123, is it just like a, oh, I'm sorry, it's like 36 on that, like is there like a,
So, yeah, that's a good question. So the main difference here is when you look at what we're looking at, this disabled mortality uniform females, there's only 22 deaths over a 5-year period.
Smaller sample size,
So-
less confidence.
So if you actually move one person here or there, the percent change is actually pretty significant.
gotcha.
And these tables where the not many members have much less than average buildings.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to use a standard table and match our data without having to change it.
Okay.
Yeah, so when you look at the retiree example, all the percentages are much closer to 100% because we've all people in this group. The disabled members, there's a lot less, so you might see a lot more fluctuating.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And it's trying to get closer to 100%.
Generally, that's the idea.
It's just not like being 112 versus 102. But just trying to change the numbers, the proposed numbers, increasing or changing the numbers to get them closer to 1. Like I guess why
Are we not exactly
Yeah.
exactly one? Part of that is the credibility. So for this example, if there's only 22 deaths,
Gotcha.
the fact that there might be 22 deaths over the next 5 to 5 years, the variation.
Looking at the overall rather than the breakdown.
Yeah, the standard table has a trend.
Yeah.
You know, if 1 or 2 deaths could throw us off that trend, but we're not able to put it on that level. And, you know, to note here, this is disabled mortality for uniform members, female, much smaller group. When you look at male, we're still not 100% not close to 1, but proposed is 111. We have a bit more data. The female, because we don't have enough data to match or.
So the bigger sample size, the higher.
Yeah. And as I said, this is such a small group that doesn't have as much impact on the benefit.
Okay. I just wondered why if it was worth trying to have better, or the goal, proposed number closer to 100% than like.
Because we're still trying to get a trend, we're not even going to choose the table for them to go up and down.
Yeah, and again, over a 5-year period, each year you're talking about 4 or 5 deaths. Even if you have 100 deaths over a 5-year period, 20 deaths is not really significant enough.
Except for those 20.
Well, in terms of our space, but yes, it matters very much.
Thanks. For
True actuaries.
Talk about that. All right, so the next assumption we're going to take a look at is retirement rates, and as we touched on, we'll see how the pandemic and other related factors have influenced these rates over these last 5-year periods. So retirement rates, those vary by group plans. So plan 67, plan 68, municipal versus uniform. Get all different tables because they can all retire based on different ages as well as different health abilities. Plan 67, no changes. There's very few members left, 195 municipal, 44 uniform scoring. So most of the members will have 7 plans or 60. So the 87 plans, we'll show on the charts, members are skewed higher, again, through the pandemic. We're not recognizing changes. So again, these charts, they're all very similar setup in terms of kind of understanding where we were with mortality. Couple takeaways here. So this is 87 municipal. The rates before age 60, we're all below 5%. That's early retirement. So you see some people retire early. But generally, we don't see it too often for these groups when we do have an assumption in there to account for it. Then once they get to age 60, there's about 20% when we start to see a marginalized retirement kind of everyone's people reach retirement. In terms of the numbers over the 5-year period at the bottom of the chart, so the gray shaded box there was about 1,900 retirements for this group. What we actually saw was what our current assumption was 1,700. So it was about the actual retirements were about 10% higher. So it's for municipal, not as much as we'll see that uniform in the next graph. While it was higher, it was not significantly higher, about 10% over this 5-year period.
And to Fran's point before, I think there's some skewing the period.
Yeah, more in so on the next chart.
And this reading, our current or proposed assumption was based on the previous experience study and was matching very close to past time. So,
Anecdotal, we've seen the reduction in versions of times, especially if we haven't gotten to the police officers.
Right.
We've seen
That's
more of a steady and full classes.
so moving on.
So moving on to the uniform. So we know this because we've seen this in the evaluations. The number of retirements have been significantly higher. It's weight on the system, it's weight on the workforce. It obviously is a cost to the system when a lot more people are retiring because they're collecting benefits earlier than expected. So that's where we end up seeing some of those losses in the valuation when we showed it earlier. So not just from a disruptive standpoint, but there is a cost component of it when a lot more people are collecting than what we anticipated from the assumptions. So we can see here, pretty clearly the observed lines are much higher than what our assumptions are called for. We do expect that to hopefully come down, and these are short-term trends. We have started to see that in recent years. 2021 to 2023, those were kind of the 3 years where it was probably over 200%, whereas the average of this period is 174%. So about 74% higher in terms of actual retirement versus expected. This first 3 years, it was over 200%. It's come down a bit, still a little bit elevated. But again, with possible short-term trends here, we're going to kind of keep this as is. We don't want to rock the ship again. We just see retirements come down and then activity in the other direction. The next thing's very exciting. So that's where we do kind of take into account what's happened in historical periods as opposed to what's kind of happened in the last 5 years. When it may not be what's expected going forward.
You're assuming everybody got everything.
Right.
So with the changes in regards, okay, so if there are changes in age limits, say for instance, with retirement, for collection of social security and things of that nature, taking those things into consideration and changes in medical technology, et cetera, et cetera. What we're seeing on the benefit side, health insurance, what we did see, we just had a utilization review. We had a reduction in the actuary from Sweden. So he's talking about the fact that we have reduced the number of people collecting life insurance, which is the first time in, I would say, probably in about 5 years, that we were at break even. And so we are seeing people staying longer, I think, with regard from an employment perspective. And I think with the change in the medical, our costs are going up because there's a change now in terms of employer contributions to Medicare, the prescription costs with regard to we're paying a higher percentage in the cost, 60% versus what we were paying before, 20%. So all of these things I think are going to contribute to people thinking about when they're going to retire. And people, I'm thinking, and you may be seeing the same things, they're going to put off retirement later if they're in reasonably good health.
Absolutely, I would agree with that. I think trends like that do develop over time, which is why we do these experience studies every 4 years. So if you start to see a trend like that, we've been taking into account and kind of start moving in that direction as a future experience study.
The other things about changing administrations, I don't know if that's something that you consider. So when we have a new administration change, people sometimes go who they were thinking about staying, but now because we have a new mayor, those kinds of things also play into, we see it on the benefit side also.
Yeah, it is a large group, so I think overall patterns, may not be influenced by smaller groups. You may not see a large variation. If there are some people that do retire.
That would be smaller, you're right. That would be smaller. That would only affect some exempt group people. And that's correct. That is smaller.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to termination from Zach. Will take over.
Good morning, everyone. I'll go through the termination assumptions as well as disability and some other assumptions that we reviewed. On the termination rates, it's a very similar theme to what we've been looking at today for retirement, where the period that we were reviewing, this 2021 through 2025, seems like it's an outlier period, and we want to take a wait and see, continue to monitor approach. But we did obviously review the actual versus our expectations for this period for all of these assumptions. And we have the results here. So termination for municipal groups, as you see it, the bars here, the gray bars and black dots here, higher than the green line. So that means that the actual rates of termination for the municipal group were higher than the expectation. So out of about 75,000 exposures over this 5-year period, our current assumptions we're assuming or expecting about 5,645 versus in actuality over the 5-year period, almost 7,067. So you see it by age here, primarily in this 25 to maybe about 49 is where the gap exists. And then on those, ages 50 to 60 plus, actually more in line with our expectation. So this could be, a number of things related to virtual work opportunities or remote work opportunities, pandemic, COVID, etc. Whatever the exact reason or multitude of reasons is, again, we're going to take this wait and see approach, continue to monitor this, and in fact, in the next experience study, maybe
expand out the period that we're looking at so that we can maybe exclude a couple of years and say, we want to look at a 10-year period and maybe exclude 3 years in here that may be technically noise so that we have a good, competent, credible period to work with. Similar situation on the uniformed group where actual terminations were higher than the expected rates. Again, taking the wait and see approach. I'll go through the numbers here. So I was about 18,000 exposures, expecting about 400. There were actually almost 600. So considerably more terminations than expected over this 4-year period. We're going to wait and see and continue to monitor this, review it, and come back next experience study with the deputies. If a trend does emerge over this period. Disability rates for both municipal and uniformed, again, skewed higher like due to the pandemic. But again, we did review, we're not making any changes at this point in time, wait and see approach. The interesting thing with disability as this board knows, the process to do the disability applications, the research, the medical, the decision making, it takes a long time. So if there was an event that triggered a high, a surge of disability applications, now there's a backlog and if an application came in 2020 or 2021, right, correlated with this pandemic, and we get valuation data every July 1st, we might, see an application that happened in 2020 not become disabled in the data until 2022 or 2023 because it takes a long time. So over this period, there were considerably higher disabilities than expected, but it basically happened that there was this big backlog. A lot of work came in to actually get through all of these applications, and then once that large amount of applications kind of got processed, it appears that it's back to like normal levels. So again, for the next experience study, we're going to expand our period that we're looking at, potentially exclude some years that are these noise outlier years, and come back and be able to review this assumption next year, or sorry, not next year. Similar situation going on.
First, want to do it more often.
I love to look at this stuff.
We do the annual experience study. When we do the evaluation, we'll look at experience, we'll see why we have gains and losses. So do some of it. But.
So the disability rates for municipal male members and female members do get distinct rates. We're not making any changes on any of the disability rates, but we do look at it separately. The municipal female actually very closely in line. Expected 125, actually 126. Smaller group, so it could just as easily been not that. But and now we look at uniforms of the disability rates for uniformed members. Out of 39,000 thereabout exposures, our assumptions would expect 134 disabilities over the 5-year period versus in actuality 191. So again, this is that one or multiple events causing a lot of applications to come up at once, and then they get processed out over time. And we, in our data, it looks like there's a lot more disabilities than expected this year and this year and this year, but it probably like that they all happen at once and are just getting transferred. So again, 142% was the A/E ratio for this group. So we're not making this assumption. We also look at other assumptions that we went through. So marriage assumption. And we are making a change here on the active members. And this is something that we did make a change last experience study. There was a similar trend, but we didn't make a change because we took this wait and see approach. Okay, well, the assumption, the actual experience is a little bit lower than our assumption. Let's see if it's going to happen consecutively over multiple experience studies. It did. So the current 70% of active members assumed to be married. We're proposing to change to 65. This is after 2 consecutive experience studies where the actual came in lower than the expected. We see for this experience study period, it was 55%. The last experience study period, I believe, 61%. So, yeah, again, we see it for multiple periods. That makes us want to actually take the action and bring this down. Spouse age difference, we reviewed this 4 years older, males 4 years older than female spouses. Actual data is about 3.5 years, 3.4 years. So we're comfortable with our 4-year age difference assumption, not proposing any changes at this time. And next we look at the ordinary versus service disability. This is another situation where last experience study period, for municipal, no changes, actual very closely in line with our current assumption. For uniform, this is another example where last experience study, we reviewed this, we took a wait and see approach. Let's see it, the service connected disability rate was a little bit higher than 75%. Since we see it happen again consecutively in this experience study, 2575 actual was 1189. So we're gonna kind of go towards that actual and proposing a 20% ordinary and 8% service disability based on our data.
20% ordinary, what's ordinary?
So like ordinary,
like termination or like what?
no, this is like a disability
Oh,
classification. So if it happened like
Outside.
outside of work.
Okay, I got you.
And then we also looked at ordinary versus service gap. And they are recommending no changes at this time for municipal or uniform as the actual is coming up very much in line with our assumptions. So
That's it.
that's our presentation. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
The other one. Okay, thank you very much. On to agenda item 3. That's the review report.
We were doing that.
Oh, do that now.
Yeah, you can vote on it now.
Now.
Carol wants it now. So we'll do that. Vice Chair has the rule. Okay. So what to do? You want to summarize where we are?
Yeah, so, at the last meeting, we had reviewed the multiplier, based on the prior practice. We have 45 million in the PAF. And, following similar rules to what's been done in the past, the service credit and the retirement years credit is going to be about between $42 and $43 per year of service. We estimate this based on evaluation data. We request the data from Sharika, the actual membership data based on eligibility, and we would produce a final multiplier based on the actual data, but we expect it to be around $3 per year of service and per year in retirement. And that would distribute pretty much the entire 45 million. We may have
In
reasonable-
1 year?
Yes, there would be a one-time lump sum, and we would probably leave a little bit of a buffer, a couple $100,000 to keep the PAF just in case the actual payments vary. Estimated.
That's not one. So what is the total amount that's in here right now? And she's about leaving how much?
Can she say what? 100,000?
So the total amount in there is $45,017,000. And between $42 and $43, we would distribute the entire 45 million. It would just be $1 or $200,000.
Have a little cushion there for adjustments.
Yes.
So
So
Carol,
we don't-
when you asked about the number, between $42 and $43 per year of credit services if you're retired, for the retirement is 10 years.
So when do we know with the actual? It's gonna be 42.
Once the board makes this decision today, then we will get the data back to us and we'll be able to have a final number and then start the process to get the payments out. Payment goes to June.
How long does that take once you get it?
I mean, once we get the data, we can produce it fairly quickly in a couple of weeks. I think the bulk of the work really is on, gonna be on Jimmy to produce the data, but, sorry. I will work with you, and you've done this before.
Again, a lot of that data comes from our OIT. Payroll. Once we get that, then we go through the process of getting the payroll set up and everything else, usually around June.
So this is for people that's been 10 years as 6/30/25.
Yeah. Yep.
So this is service years, every retirement year, right? No.
Yeah.
I'm just going over, I just want to know the right because I don't want no confusion. Okay, so service years and credit years, and even 42,000. And, it's gonna be payable, maybe,
Right, we're aiming for June. People.
and it's gonna be included in either in June or July check, when it could. Going to the next fiscal year.
I mean, yeah, fine.
It won't go into the next. It'll be included in June check.
Yeah, that's we're aiming for June.
Okay.
Question. Your motion?
That's a recommendation for distribution of P and F
Is according to our past, is
according to our past.
there a second? I'll second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
And would you have a motion to approve our expense study and the proposed assumption for 7/1/2026? Or is that something?
You bet, I sure did.
But don't forget to exclude the, I'm sorry.
You experience that.
We don't mean the extraordinary term.
Just the mortality change, yes, that's correct.
We can do that.
Yeah, yeah.
There's, yeah, the change. Yeah, now we have to, it's mortality rate. Yeah, it would be to make the two changes on this table. Validate and other. Those are things like the marriage, something that they show.
So that's page 13, which is something.
Yeah.
So we sort of do the retaliation.
But then other, you see that, and then there's a little bit of what's, both of those genes, right? Yeah. Right.
Because we have a motion to accept the.
I should, or just what they had. Good? Is there a motion to accept the recommendation to change assumptions of mortality rates and the other category?
I'll make a motion to accept the changes in mortality rate and the other category.
For a second,
Second.
all those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Carries. Now, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So I don't understand why it's not making a motion.
Experience.
Experience that.
Yeah, I
Do it that way.
yeah.
There's us.
I don't understand why we're not making a motion for the whole experience that.
Do that too.
You want to make a motion?
I make a motion that we accept the hearing study presented today as.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Motion carries. Now, really, thank you.
Thank you. for listening.
Me too, that's how it's. I'm sorry.
Slide out. Oh, you're fine. I'm still box you in. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Stacy told me you were coming.
What year is it?
I'm gonna say hi to my old boss.
Sorry.
You know what?
You can take it.
National Foundation. I just-
Am I smart enough to present without shirts? That's my boss.
I'm just. Something new. I've seen you on TV.
That tells me something bad about your view.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for comments, but
I'm sorry to show up. Oh, great.
Yes. Take it out. You going? I guess you want this one. I'm following.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's slide out.
Yeah, exactly.
Haley, I'm just gonna put this on mute till after the break, okay?
Sounds good.
All right.
So,
I know it's preliminary.
well, no, I mean, so I would say just having a, structurally balanced portfolio, not making a ton of changes. And I think there has been some benefit, obviously, to the lump sum in cash relative to the last couple of weeks. I would say one thing though, and this is not something that I think, at least in the short term, you can do a lot of the portfolio, but that is, I think, of increasing concern, not just, for this pension fund, but more broadly, is that over the past, I'd say 20 years or so, there's been a much more negative correlation between stocks and bonds. And that started to break down a little bit over the last 2 or 3 years, but it's been really pronounced the last month. And you can really see that in the estimates, where the S&P is down about 4.5%, and bonds are down 2.3%. So while you're still getting some protection from bonds, it's not nearly as good as what you would have seen historically, back to 2008 or so. The longer that persists, the more of a challenge it is to have a kind of a balanced portfolio that you would want to behave, kind of in a traditional way. And so I do think that, at least for now, having cash that's paying around 3.5% as a substitute for fixed income, which is down to 10.25%, is a good thing.
Right.
The question is, how long will that continue? And if you're in a period where inflation reignites and then you have stock market going down, those numbers I talked about with stocks and bonds, that could continue. And so that,
We got to even get worse.
it could. And so that's probably the biggest concern I have at the moment. There are increasing odds, obviously, of a recession. Unemployment's above its 3-year average, which is generally not a good sign in terms of, recession above. Tyrone and I were talking a little bit yesterday. There's been really weak treasury auctions this week. The 2- and 5-year treasury auctions were very, very weak. The 5-year yields have climbed 40 basis points just since the end of February. And the number of foreign buyers has dropped. The number of bank, kind of like forced buyers, bank buyers, has climbed relative to individual buyers. So none of that, I think, are very good signs, at least in the short to medium term, just broadly for the economy.
It's interesting, Chris, because it translates into deferred comp also. As to what people can do, especially given the alternatives within deferred comp that aren't paying the cash rate that you would have. So that alternative isn't available. So, if consumers in fixed income, you're thinking, well, this is, say, they've been taking a beating, fixed income, taking a beating over the last several weeks. So it's important for us to be, for Don upstairs, I'm sure he's advising people as such, be careful with fixed income. May not be acting as it traditionally has. So it's a great point.
And Rob, I guess one other thing that's been of slight, help, is I know we've done some rebalancing, but the kind of the having more domestic stocks than international stocks, that actually was a headwind, earlier in the fiscal year. Foreign markets have actually done worse since the war started. So that's been a little bit also protected. I think you see that even more if fixed income wasn't getting hit, but that has definitely helped too. The U.S. stocks haven't gotten beat up as much as international.
And Chris, not to belabor the point, back to deferred comp, the target date funds, they have a piece of international, a piece of domestic, and a piece of fixed income. Theory is, diversification, but you're right, the fixed income and the international can be, which require to tell. It's really been difficult.
Yep.
People target, which is supposed to be set it, forget it, sort of.
Yeah, they're really
not so much.
There really haven't been a lot of good, options goals come down like $1,000.
We should put it all on PBAC.
Be a former controller, a couple of former controllers back who want gold. So I'll let, quickly talk about briefly about the RFP, the rebalancing, the two managers, and then, Chad can just make a couple of comments on the, private credit deadline.
Yeah, so on the RFP, I think everyone was copied on the email that Chris sent out. So just a quick recap there. On the RFP, we decided to prioritize allocating money to Core Plus fixed income. Core Plus is your investment grade, but it does invest in what's known as plus income.
This memo.
Yeah, so the memo is going to be number tab number 3. And then it's the very first memo, which just points to the overall rebalancing of the RRP monies. Really quickly, we are staggering that, the amounts on this particular table. So the initial rebalancing that took place it's been a little lower than the phase 1.
I'm not sure everyone's finding the memo, so Chief kind of walk that through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So under tab 3, you're going to see a memo. It's called the RRP Sources and Use of Recommendation Update. So every time that we receive RRP monies, we put together a table that just outlines the cadence and the amounts of the rebalancing. This is not any different where we're talking about the amount that's been received. It was actually an amount of 563.4 million. So the estimate was 570.5 million, lower than that. And then we just talked about where we are relative to our targets in the portfolio. So as we think about the portfolio, we have approved targets per the IPS. We look to shore up where we're underweight with the cash coming in. Now, with the cash coming in, we essentially made the decision along with staff to keep the bulk of the RRP money in cash and slowly rebalance into fixed income. So you'll see under this particular table.
Why is that?
Yeah, so we really wanted to be mindful of where we were in the stock market. So we had a very good 2025. We had no idea that things were going to happen, how they have been. We looked at the market with big believers in neighborhood. So if you think about the market doing exceptionally well in 2025, you're at the top of the market, prudent to shore up where you're underweight, as opposed to add more risk in the portfolio. So fixed income was underweight, and we thought it was prudent to start looking at fixed income. Now, as Chris mentioned, cash is yielding 3.5%, and it doesn't have the volatility that we see in fixed income right now. So there wasn't really any pressure to reallocate into fixed income. So the first tranche we have the phase 1 of the table would be a $200 million rebalance into fixed income from the cash received. However, of that 200 million stated here, we fully put around a little over 9 million, around $9 million. And that's between two managers, Longfellow that had 25 million rebalanced from them, and Matt License had 62.5 million rebalanced.
So everybody else is not getting the rebalance. That was,
So they will be. We've
but
just
not right now.
exactly. We've just been staggering them in light of the volatility. So holding on to the cash has basically helped us because fixed income has lost value in this environment. But the other managers will be receiving the cash. We're just pacing it a little slower in light of everything going on.
Chris, I bring this up. We talked about this before. Kyle, you'll remember too. Remember Ken back then used to recommend it would be nice if we got the city contribution at various units over here. I know that's not much for me, but this might be.
Hold on to them.
This might be. Well, this might be a way to do that. Where you're getting the 3.5%, right, and gradually implement it. I'm not saying you do that on a regular basis. Right. I'm saying given the market circumstances and given the amount that's being paid in cash, it's kind of a way to do that.
Yep.
Everybody remembers the pension obligation, which is a city.
No, what was that?
Which is a city, which is just because it came up in city council yesterday also. When those three words come up, pension obligation bond, people know that's city up.
Who mentioned it, but they were.
It's not a pension, but that was the big bond money, right? And then right before the dot-com bubble. Dot-com bubble had no money, but it was after that where Ken would mention, well, isn't it, would be easier to put money, periodically. It's not possible, but this is the way to do that.
Yeah.
3.5%, if you went to any of our fixed income, that they paid that recently. Right. Interesting.
And the other thing, even though we don't have a crystal ball, but we all assume use, unfortunately, or to our benefit. If we look at what's going on with oil, energy prices going up, unemployment rates going up,
No, that's not what he said.
the Fed ultimately pausing on interest rates. So going into the year, the expectation was for rates to come down. Some folks are arguing the rates still could come down. Some folks are arguing they weren't taking whether they could potentially go up. But all of this noise points to volatility in the economy, volatility during times like this, having a good amount of cash, even though we're not trying to time the market, is definitely a good thing.
It's only cash management plans.
Yes, it allows us to buy them. It allows us to not sell off when the market's down, and it just again gives us a cushion that we need as we think about this environment.
So is there a date by, each of the phases is supposed to take place?
So
So,
yeah, so we typically it's typically over a number of quarters. Last year, for example, we set 12 to 18 months, just given the uncertainty around interest rates. And I would say 12 to 18 months continues to be in line with what we're looking at. So the phases, we can think about the quarters, it's typically over a quarterly period. And then as we've done, as it's time to rebalance, we would be at the table again looking at the macro environment. And if, for example, yields are still going up, fixed income is losing in value, that would be an example of saying when we first sat at the table with you, the expectation was for 12 months. We think extending it out a little bit makes a lot more sense.
and
So,
like, well, that's like, we might have to push back phase 2 and phase 3.
Yes. yes, correct. Yeah, sure. So from a performance standpoint, I need to jump into the performance summary very quickly. I think all of you have the performance book, right? The market performance book. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to jump into a quick summary on two of the managers that were flagged for performance reasons. Now, I would say that everything that's going on, so this is going to be under page 18 of the market book. And that's gross. Okay, page 25. Page 25 gets us the net fee results. So the two managers we're going to look at, one is Fiera, one is on the next page, which is Fidelity. Now with Fiera, it's going to highlight here very quickly. You'll see for the 1 month period, they sold off, they were down 2.3%. The index was down 50 basis points. You'll see on a since inception basis, Fiera is ahead of the benchmark. You'll see, a little further out, the returns have been good, but over the short term, they've given back some. So very quickly, what has happened with Fiera? Well, we've been through a market for 4 years, right?
But that, I don't want you to skewed by what just happened.
But a lot of that has been skewed by what's been happening, I would say, as part of this overall cycle. So as we think about manager performance and index performance, it's been a pretty tough period for average and above average active manager.
It looks like for calendar year 23 was the last calendar year. Yeah.
Yes, that is correct. That is correct. And that would point to the market environment that we've been in 2024 and 2025. So we think about very aggressive stocks that don't necessarily have the earnings or the business model to support very high valuations. Those have been the types of stocks that have been rewarded. And I would say that for active managers that are typically more focused on, fundamentals, stocks that are fairly priced or not wanting to buy the stocks which chase momentum, they would have lagged the benchmark. So we would expect, and I think this is the clear line in the sense to put in, we would expect in this period of volatility, for a manager like Fiera to actually start doing pretty well as investors start caring more about earnings, projections, and the viability of business models. So the quick takeaway is Fiera has lagged and they didn't perform as strongly as benchmark, but we would expect in this volatile environment, Fiera to actually hold up versus the benchmark.
So is your approach different from the other managers? So effectively, it stays in the flag.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that their approach is a little different for the growth manager, the growth segment. Emerald is momentum, it's more of a momentum manager, so they're capturing the upside, right? And I would look at them as a good complement to an Emerald in the portfolio. Should Emerald underperform, for example, you'd expect Fiera to kind of carry some of the weight, and then vice versa.
Yeah, what would you say right now we should go consider?
Yeah. I mean, I would say at this point, there is a resetting in the market, meaning that again, your quality, your dividends, your stability of business models are finally being rewarded. And I would say that if things do not materialize in the next quarter or two for Fiera, that's where we would have a more serious about them, given that the market is now rotating into these sectors more favorable.
Okay. So wait a minute, so on page 25, for Fiera, right? So for the first, well, that's the first only 3 months, well, that's the first quarter of 2026, right?
Yep.
So that's showing a negative 2.6%.
Correct. Yes.
So, and year to date, they're negative 2.4%.
Correct.
So if you go back to 2023, like Rob said, the performance was 25.4%.
Yes.
Then in 24 went to 6.41%. Then 25 is 7%.
Yes.
So it hasn't come up to mentions in 3 years.
So I would say 2 years in terms of 2024, 2025, 2026 is still playing out.
Okay, 2 years.
But it has been 2 years that is correct. And again, as we think about that since inception numbers, when we think about the market environment that we've been in, the market environment has been one where, particularly in a growth segment of the market, more aggressive growth companies have performed really, really well. Managers that are in less aggressive growth would have lagged the benchmark. So we think in this environment, the less aggressive growth should do pretty well. And let's say, for example, Emerald, that's done exceptionally well in this aggressive growth environment, pulls back, we would expect Fiera to do well. So that's their role in the portfolio to really complement what Emerald is doing.
That's the problem. They're not complimenting Emerald. Emerald is doing very, very well. Fiera is not.
Because of the environment. Aggressive growth doing really, really well, which is now.
But are you considering the environment and since the war or the environment before the war?
Before. And the war is probably expedited that in the sense that the war is now pushing us closer to a
How
recession.
much money they got?
So from an allocation standpoint, let's get that real quick.
They're both growth, right?
They're both growth,
One's
but just different types.
1,000 growth, one's close to 2,500.
Yes.
So they're both growth.
Yeah.
Yes.
So complement's not stark, right? It's subtle. Right? No. Yeah.
Emerald is.
What
Emerald
about
is,
the benchmarks?
I understand, but Emerald is much more, and I'm just not saying this is a good or a bad thing, it's just factual. They are much more aggressive. They don't worry about companies like without earnings or negative earnings. So when companies like that are being rewarded, Emerald is going to do exceptionally well. To Quaker's point, even in a growth benchmark, if you have a less aggressive growth manager, one who, I don't want to say prioritizes, but looks at earnings a little bit more, or there are certain areas of the growth index that they're going to ignore or not buy, there's going to be some differences even within those two growth managers.
No, I get that. I guess my question really was, is the Russell 2000 growth index adequately reflect what Emerald does? I guess that's more of the question, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, the Russell 2000 Growth Index does. And then Fiera has a different benchmark, so it's a Smith strategy.
25,000, 2,500.
Yeah. Right.
So what's the big difference between 2,000 and 2,500 for both growth indexes, right? All I'm saying is, if Fiera was a value fund, I can understand saying it complements a growth fund. How does a growth fund complement a
So-
growth fund? That's, I mean, they're the benchmarks. That's-
So the best way to put it is, with the 2,500 and the Russell 2000, around 70% of the stocks that outperformed were unprofitable companies. Fiera is not going to overweight or dabble in that 78% of unprofitable companies, meaning that at some point when these unprofitable companies revert to the mean from a valuation standpoint, Fiera would outperform.
So, and I get that,
And that 57 million or 60 basis points less than 1%.
how much is it?
57 or approximately 60 basis points of the portfolio.
And I understand what you're saying, but in 2023 again, Rob's point, it was 25.4%. 2024, they went all the way down to 6.1. 2025, they did 7. They still haven't captured being in. So when do their whatever they do kick in?
You would
Because
say this
they
is our-
still haven't captured the 19 that they lost from 2023.
Yeah, so we would say this environment, again, it's this environment where there's going to be more discernment amongst your investors around quality. This should be the environment Fiera does well. So again, going back to previous periods, 2024, 2025, it didn't necessarily matter what stocks were outperforming in terms of how good their business was. They were just being bought up and investors were buying up stocks irrespective of whether they were good or bad. This environment, we would expect some of the bad stocks that have been rewarded to finally lose their value. And you would expect Fiera to start outperforming in this type of environment. So again, we would say that this is the environment where we expect Fiera to do well. And we think it would be reasonable to at least evaluate over the next quarter or two as the environment is changing to see how it. So we know
it's been a very short time, but have you
Yes.
seen any of that yet? We've seen they're doing well over.
Yes, no, so we have, and I would use McKinsey as another example, just to pivot to a completely different part of the market. So McKinsey, International Small Cap, we had similar discussions around them. And parts of the international small cap area were doing exceptionally well with McKinsey. That stuck to them, they weren't buying the stocks that were high momentum based off just the price. They wanted to buy good investments. And as we've seen the international market retreat and more cautiousness around the types of stocks that investors want to reward, we've seen McKinsey do well. So I would say that this is the type of discussion we'll continue to have.
And we've seen that in Fidelity so far. I mean, we started to see that, that's.
Yeah, so with
Fiera, sorry, I got the wrong hat.
Yeah. No, so with Fiera, we have, again, it's very, very short. It's a very, very short period of time. But I would say that we have begun to see the types of stocks that Fiera likes get rewarded now, especially post-invasion, right? The market sinking. And the analogy is like, I think I've used this before, right? Whenever you're on a plane and there's volatility, you don't have atheists on the crashing plane, right? Everyone suddenly believes in God, everyone suddenly has religion. And I would say that the same analogy is here, where you have people that all of a sudden care about fundamentals in the market as the market is crashing. So as you think about fundamentals being reported more, those stubs that Viera had would be delivered more. Again, way too short of a period. If you look at that since inception return, since inception, they're still comfortably ahead of the benchmark, 70 basis points. So you also want to balance that long-term performance with that short-term.
You know, I kind of disagree with your analogy of the increase of the claim, but anyway, it's a increase.
I was just gonna stay away from that.
I'm gonna get away with that, Robin. Wait a minute, let me finish. No. But it's just like you just said with the rebalancing money, the city gave us money to rebalance, and we're taking a different approach because cash is making more money than put the money into the market with the advantage, correct? So I want to know where the stocks at that Viera should have been invested in all these 2 years that they ain't invested and we ain't get our money back.
Yeah, so that I'd say that's apples and oranges in the sense of you have Emerald doing one thing that's aggressive. You have Viera doing another thing that's more conservative. More conservative managers are not going to reward it. So in this environment, we're expecting the more conservative managers to now get rewarded. So again, it's this environment that we're in where we think Viera should start performing well. So we would recommend holding on to Viera, looking at them for the next quarter or two as we're in this more conservative environment to see if that thesis is working.
They got a quarter, Rob. That's all I can give you. They got a quarter. I'm not gonna go back and forth.
It's
Viera got a quarter.
It was going one way. We have a pretty clear demarcation line here now, and if there's still gonna be, less than you have a 1 month, ticker on here, if there's, seems like.
And I'm not saying we have to terminate, but we have to start taking our money back. I'm just like, they got a quarter.
Well,
That's my impression.
what I was gonna say, Carol, is given the size of the allocation being as small as it is, the one part I would disagree with is I would say if you're going to take capital at that point, given the small size, so you might as well take it all. That's
I don't have a problem with that. I was just trying to be nice.
No, I understand. No, I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm just saying with 57 million, it's less than 1% of the portfolio.
I'm not trying to make anybody unemployed, but
I
also
got
I'm trying to keep my memory for so much.
So I would also say from that standpoint, again, it's not a large allocation either. So if the board is uncomfortable even at this stage, as opposed to waiting a month, 2 months, 3 months, the money can be put into the, into the index. We set that up. So, I'm comfortable either way. It's
I'll
not.
make a motion to terminate. Put the money in the index. What index? Whatever staff recommendation is, as long as we get the money. So go ahead, Chris.
The Russell too,
2,500 or 2,000?
2000. We don't have an index for the 2500. So we have the closest approximation we have the two.
But can there's discussion. I'll wait for that.
Okay.
Quite honestly, we pay you to guide us right now,
Yes.
right?
Yes, correct.
I'm gonna put you on the spot, but you think we should hold this for a quarter or two? Right? Because you think that this is when we're gonna see the progress to make up for some of the limitations that are happening in other parts.
Correct. 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 And
I know what you're saying, and I'm with you, because 2 years is a long time. If what you're saying makes sense, and this is what we're paying for, I would be comfortable, short period of time. I'm gonna say 1 quarter, certainly gonna. We can't come back with similar results a quarter from now and give them another.
right.
We have to start to see them come back to cruising altitude.
Right.
I'll let you play next.
Brian, is you saying you don't think it religion?
Real fast.
I just think that's what that's what we pay you for. Well, you're good at it, and I think we should lean into that a little bit and wait for
1 quarter.
a quarter. And if we're seeing progress, maybe we give it a quarter. Just hate to make a rash decision. What you're saying makes sense to me.
So I'm just going off the data. So I understand that the 1 month, the 3 month, the year to date's behind it. If we look at since inception, It's given us an average annual return of 12.6. The index has given us a return of 11.9. So we are making money. We have made money from this manager. So,
But you can make just as much with the index, you just said that.
but we've made
So
more.
it ain't-
We've made
You can
more.
make just as much with the index.
You know,
And I hear what you're saying, Brian, but I gotta lean to,
It's just discussion. I don't want to stop it.
yeah, because it's not that they're beating the index by a large amount of, basis point, they right neck and neck, like, they did.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No.
Oh, no, I'm finished. My motion is still on the table.
And I guess the question quickly was, do you think that they will be right on the index going forward, or you would actually beat it by a substantial amount?
So that's going to be a tough one, but what we can do is look at the calendar year results just to give us a sense of how this manager does when it bounces back. So if we jump to the calendar year result very quickly,
Okay.
it's going to be page 31. You are going to see that when they have outperformed the index, this is going back through 2017, they outperformed by a little less than 3%. They outperformed by a little bit more than 3%. They did triple the benchmark in 2022. They significantly
21.
Sorry, 2021.
22, they.
No, 21, they outperformed.
So they outperformed, sorry,
Yeah.
by 5.
So they outperformed the index. They did triple the index in 2021. They outperformed the index by a healthy degree in 2022. They significantly outperformed the index in 2023. So it goes back to, okay,
Really the last 2 years.
the last 2 years they have underperformed, but again, the long-term batting average is pretty good. But again, it's a trustee decision at the end of the day. I would say that the style of this manager, what they do, their outperformance, again, has typically been ahead of the benchmark. But ultimately, it looks like that's leading towards termination. Again, I've kind of gone through the data using the since inception numbers to say since inception, we're up 70 basis points in net of fees on page 25 versus the index. That's a healthy since inception number. If you think about since January of 2010, it's been 70 basis points at the outperformance.
Going back to 17, there were 3 years where they were under.
So that's the annualized return through.
So yeah,
No,
wait a minute, let me go to that page, that you with that page. So in 2017, they did 27.1, right?
Yeah.
So then in 2018, they lost. In 2019, they came up to 31.6. Okay, so that's like 4%, 4 point more, right? Then they gave us a big jump in 2020 of 43, but they lost over half of it in 2021. Even though it was a positive return,
20.
in 2020, in 2020, no, in 2020, no. In 2020, they made 43.2, am I right? So in 2021, they made 15.7, but it's going backwards, even though they didn't go all the way down, so, right?
But also
So
look at
then,
the index.
in
The
20
index that year was 5%.
Right.
So they had a good year that year.
So in 2022, they did a minus 21, so they lost about half of what they gained in 20.
Yeah,
20,
but their
right?
index was minus 26.
So now we here, we back here again. So they lost the 2 years. So
But in that year, if we'd just done the index, which is the other option.
in which year, Rob? I'm sorry.
22, we would have lost more if we'd been in an index.
Yeah,
And I
we
think
would. That's
correct.
yeah, you're correct. But right now, we're not making as much either.
Correct.
And
Yeah, for the last couple of years.
and right now, the index is we're neck and neck with the index right now, right?
We're
So-
below the index.
Hasn't been any keep fire changes, I'm sure we looked at that.
Correct, not within the team. Like organizationally, Sierra has gone through different iterations, but no, not within the team. It's a pretty well-resourced team. And again, this is cycles, this is investing with active managers, even the best active managers at some point run into frustrating periods like this. So it's really a question of, whether you will have the tolerance to say, okay, this is the environment that they should outperform, let's stick with them. Or if we go with the benchmark, it's the understanding that we're doing just as well as the benchmark and we stick with the benchmark.
Okay, Bob, my motion still stays on the table.
Okay. Is there a second?
I thought we already had the second.
I didn't hear a second.
Okay.
But there was no second.
So y'all gonna give them a month, y'all gonna give them a quarter, y'all gonna give them 2 quarters, because we ain't got that much money to lose. So when they lose, it's gonna stay, don't buy. When the road
Yeah.
goes, that's next.
Yeah, next time we come back to the next meeting. Happen, because
30
we're told
days.
this they should start.
And I would say on page 23 as well, we're not losing.
Stop pushing it, we get the point. Hey, move to the next one.
We're not
Stop pushing it.
we're not losing.
Stop pushing it. Stop pushing it.
He's ready to make a
Notice
motion.
You might get her a second.
Okay, so let's jump to Fidelity. I'll say, Kyle, whatever you want to do in Fidelity.
Oh, you want to give it for them?
Fidelity, I would say that Fidelity's been, that's a much tougher one. So Fidelity, yeah, page 26. So Fidelity, I would say that they have been a manager that we have given a good amount of grace. We give them some leeway, but they have not really been able to perform, whether it's in a growthier environment, whether it's in a more quality environment. They really seem to miss the mark. So on page 26, so you'll see that with Fidelity,
There hasn't been a period really where they.
no, correct. So with Fidelity, it's been tough to say that, okay, if we go back and look at their returns, this is when they've done well. We expect them to turn around and perform pretty well for us. So,
Here's the place we would have done better.
correct.
Period.
Correct. And on page 33, you'll see on the calendar year side of things, unlike Fiera, Fidelity 2023, 2024, 2025, each one of these years, they've not gotten it right. So that's a much easier discussion, I would say.
And their rank is pretty low.
Correct. So they have not ranked well, they've not performed well.
Still where it go, but up.
So with Fidelity, that is definitely one where the numbers don't point to giving them any more leeway, or as much leeway as we have.
And the, how many we have with them?
So with Fidelity, it is a little less than what we have with MFS.
The recommendation being that one stay in the same asset class, global mobile, or elsewhere.
No, we would,
You know,
yeah, we would, especially in this environment, we would expect Global Evolve to continue to hold up pretty well.
Has it, like very early again, but which hasn't been.
It had, yes, so the quick answer is, yes, it has been helped overall by the international environment. But in fact, Chris has the fiscal year to date, as well as the year to date numbers. They can just give you a little bit more picture as to how it's a little bit more.
Yeah, it's held up well over those 2 periods that it's Rob to your point on the short term, and that's where, again, since the war started, I think everything. It has not held up in the 25 days or so since the war started, but to Quaker's point, fiscal year to date and year to date, it has held up very well compared to the problem. So I think the only thing we would want to think about, and that's not something that has to necessarily be decided today, is whether or not the board's comfortable with just the one manager in Global Evolve, whether you want us to provide, we did the index as an option a couple of meetings ago, so we could, if Fidelity were terminated, we could move the money into the index as opposed to having all of the Global Evolve money with MFS.
That makes sense to me, but.
Like you always said, MFS already operating differently
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
too, so you want to put all that money in MFS, giving them the deal, or do you think the index will operate? To use your word,
Yes, I think a little in the index and a little bit more to MFS would be a good mix.
Put it a little mean.
We can check with stuff, but I would say about a quarter of the allocation to NFS would allow an active manager that's done well, close to the index across cycles to continue to do that. And then with the index, we don't run the risk of sector concentration with everything going on right now.
And index temporarily, well, we look at it, if we're leaving.
I would say we leave it in the index and then we revisit, just because there's other areas in the portfolio that probably we want to prioritize your guys' time in terms of looking at active managers. So the index is a really good placeholder for us. And then after a couple of quarters, we reevaluate whether the appetite is to look at actives.
And the index that we compare fidelity against, the index we compare.
That's a good question. I'll double check that with stuff. I would say that the one we compare NFS against would definitely be appropriate. I don't see why we couldn't just go with that.
Other question? So, say, yeah, so I move that we fidelity and then move to level that's suggested. For a second part of that. Then move to proper second, all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed, the intention, motion carries. And then you'll come back with those specific recommendations.
Correct.
Yeah, it would be about the following week's recommendation, about 44 to 45. I think that's 130, 135.
And the AC world. What's the least availability? AC world.
So the AC will have some EM, emerging market exposure. And then the other one will have your developed market, your international markets, but no EM, emerging markets.
I can send an email out today or tomorrow. I would just want to double check what the RFP said.
Okay.
I just want to double check. I don't recall often. But we can start that. And then she just wanted, I know there's been a lot of headlines and I've gotten a few questions around private credit. So if you wanted to spend a minute just talking about what people have been reading, vis-a-vis what is invested in our portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, any of the media sources in this space have been saying very similar things. The loudest headlines, if I were to distill it all down into one major theme, it's around investor redemption pressure on the non-traded BTC and interval funds. Those are retail-oriented vehicles. And if you look at the headlines, it's all focused on the largest asset managers, those that have really benefited from a swell of retail flows into private credit via those vehicles in recent years. The redemptions for Q1 have been elevated from the prior 5-year history. And if you think about the design of those vehicles, they have contractual liquidity obligations to give investors 5% liquidity out of the fund each quarter. Some of them have flexibility to go up to 7%, but in that range, 5 to 7%. Most of the redemptions that we've seen have been elevated. Now, if you kind of peel back the onion on what those redemptions look like, it's primarily retail, and a lot of that is coming from non-US or Asian retail investors that have decided to put in their redemption request. There's no cost doing so. The vehicles are operating exactly as designed, which means that they offer some liquidity, but there is the ability to gate it to protect investors in the fund and not force selling of these assets. They're illiquid assets. To tap the market and have to meet all of those redemptions would likely have a negative impact on those going out, also those that are in the funds. Now, if you look at the credit fundamentals across private credit in general, we're not seeing any of the deteriorations that would warrant concerns around what's happening underneath the surface. Default rates haven't spiked. We haven't seen non-accruals, which would indicate further stress. We haven't seen credit fundamentals in terms of EBITDA and any other measure you really want to look at, really indicating stress at the portfolio level. On the institutional side, you're not seeing that same pressure from redemptions. If you look at the asset class as a whole, still predominantly institutional ownership, about 78% of the total private credit market is owned by institutions. And again, much more stable capital. much more to focus on the actual fundamentals, which again are generally holding up very, very well. So a lot of the headlines are around really just the lower redemptions, base rates have come down, this is a floating rate asset class, and seeing those quarterly income distributions lower than they had seen prior. A lot of the reaction to retail investors from that is sort of what's playing out in the redemption queues. Again, none of this is affecting the underlying assets. They're not forced to sell because of the natural liquidity that's being offered and the limits that are in place. And again, the institutional vehicles, what this pension owns, are generally all performing as expected. Again, not seeing that deteriorating fundamental erosion at this point. Now, again, it's credit, right? So we could see some of that start to show up, but we're not seeing any of that today that would warrant concern or a change of course on the allocation of private credit in your portfolio.
Michael and Chris were involved in the previous discussion concerning bleeding over of the private credit situation to financial institutions, other banks, insurance companies, whatever. Can you comment on that brief a little bit?
Yeah.
Because we have that in our portfolio, specifically low. Right? I mean, large portion of that is financial institutions.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to start, but happy to weigh in on. The one other comment I'll just make is, again, those headlines are focused on the largest alternative asset managers that are out there. It is not uniformly across the board where we're seeing every one of these funds with elevated redemptions. I think what's just notable that have not seen any of it at all, and the investor base is really what's driving that. As it relates to spilling over into other institutions and banks, you're seeing some headlines with like JP Morgan. The headline was that they are they're taking haircuts on certain segments of private credit. The reality is they're doing that as a way to protect their own balance sheet, to not have too much exposure to any one segment. Now, mind you, at the same time, they're also ramping up their own efforts in private credit. So they're looking at the whole pie and saying, let's limit this over here externally, allow us to continue doing what we're doing internally. So it's one way of sort of thinking about what may affect some of these institutions and how that the headline may not actually be what was really happening beneath the surface. So, but quick ahead, yeah.
On your comments, brought that up.
Yes. So, yes. And then I would just say tangential to that. So the whole private credit issue, it's not even private credit, it's BDC. So
Yes.
I think the best way to look at it, it's a retail versus institutional thing that's happening. So we as institutional investors are essentially cushioned from a lot of what the headlines are talking about right now. The retail investors are the ones feeling the pain. I don't, your guys are Nationwide on your side, and they're not gonna push anything, but if you have members talking about alternatives. But if your members are talking about alternatives in the DC lineup, for example, I think this would be a good real-time example to say that, yes, we have alternatives in the pension, but alternatives, the reality of alternatives in institutions versus the retail individual investors, is two very different experiences.
That's a good point, because this board should be happy. This board made a conscious decision not to invest in BDCs when it was recommended previously. I thought you guys. Right. So that was a good move by the board.
Say with the BDC, let's just, here for the moment.
Yes.
You'll remember those, Karen. You remember Cliffwater recommended them. By the way, they were the company, the private credit. That was headline in the Wall Street Journal article for redemptions. Any other questions about that?
And then just to close, the securities lending income in February, just under $204,000, 414,388, year to date, 57.87 million since the program started. Local and diverse AUM combined, 61.76%. Female and minority managers combined 51.56, just under 12%. Philadelphia and surrounding counties.
And that's actually increased over time, to look back to the.
Yes.
Yeah.
Relative to some. Yeah. Relative to some topics that came up recently. And the upcoming board meeting is April 23rd, May 28th. And then there was some very preliminary discussion about moving to June 25th.
Yeah. So let's talk about the June 25th meeting. It's up a week. How about that work is just getting doesn't work for June 25th doesn't work for the acting director.
You wouldn't have. You wouldn't have the updated performance reports. Maybe you would get them a day or two before. But you get them on the 16th or the 17th, but when the books went out, the 11th or the 12th, you'd still be April, so.
Yeah. What if we move it early? Or that whole week is not good?
Whole week's not good. We move it to very early the next week. That'll work.
I mean, you got the 8th.
Yeah, 20th to 30th.
You're not gonna be interfering on this recreations.
Club and World Cup.
Yeah.
I have that in front of me. The World Cup, there is a game June 25th, so that I can't, I write that.
You wouldn't be either.
I don't know. So there's a game Saturday, which is irrelevant, Saturday, so the following week, leading up to July 4th, there are no Philadelphia games.
What'd you say, Brian?
There are no scheduled Philadelphia matches the week of the 29th. That leads up to July 4th.
Can you do the search? Can you do the search?
Either one.
Is the 30th that bad to check?
I'm
in Chicago.
That whole week too?
I come back first, second.
Where is your Chicago?
No.
Or 50th
I'll
anniversary?
be back here on the second.
Second.
Be Thursday?
Yeah.
And then you push it to the guess it's not. But
Yeah.
I know you look like you look at that and look at that. They're reading room.
Your public servant do not have a.
Yeah,
that's right.
Either.
What'd you say?
Public servants don't have a Sunday, that's.
Working.
Yeah.
Or Catherine.
So what happens if we go the week ahead, Chris?
We won't have information.
The 18th or the 19th? But then.
Does the second work for everybody? Good.
Gotta have the air conditioning on.
I second that. That's your day. Okay, so let's move it to the second.
July 2nd.
Okay. Any new business? Let's move up to your turn. Your turn, for the full board, in session. Is there a motion to adopt the action taken by investment committee? Thank you. To move about the second bid, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstention, motion carried. Well, the second bid, we are adjourned. We are adjourned. All right. Yeah. Nice job.
I just wanted to make sure. I ain't bad. It's my trustee.
That's okay.
That's good.